Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk and for episode 11 of the Eat, Sleep, Arsenal Repeat podcast. We are a man down this week. No Owen. He's at a snooker tournament. I mean, how dare he have a life outside of this podcast? It's just unforgivable. However, I'm very happy to be joined by Dr. Raj. How you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Yeah, doing well. Glad to finally be back after a bit of a hiatus here. So, how about yourself?
Yeah, very good. You've enjoyed a nice trip away. Was it good to refresh and maybe not get your mind off Arsenal because you don't want to get your mind off Arsenal at the moment? But I suppose you did miss the elimination from the Europa League. You dodged that one, I guess.
No, I watched it. It was on at 11 p.m., which is it just everything was flipped. Instead of being morning games, it was now
Yeah.
late night games. So, I definitely watched it. I didn't. I think I think in our group chat I said, good riddance. It's one of the. It's not a tournament. You could tell that. I mean, you could tell they didn't prioritize it really from the
Mm.
rotation. And so it's just one of those tournaments. It's like you want to compete in it, but you don't really care that much, to be honest.
I mean, yeah, it's like a lot of people were annoyed afterwards, and a lot of people were saying, like, Arsenal need to improve their European pedigree, and this would have been a great chance to do that. But in a season where we are competing for the title, and especially after we won the game against Palace, that Palace game really did make me think, wow, we have now one game a week, bar 1 week, which is the game we play against City. But even then, we've got a game on the Friday before that because the irony of all of that is if we'd have gone through that Friday game before City would have been moved to Sunday, and then we would have had 2 days rest and then travelled up to Manchester. So probably just one day's rest.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually worked out kind of nicely. I'm going to be in Chicago for that weekend of the Southampton game as well. So it would have meant I would have been out there for 2 games, the Europa League quarters and Southampton. But I'm actually, part of me is a little bit, actually, a lot of me is quite pleased that is going to work out. Look, if we get to the end of the season and we've won the title, I will not care one jot that we didn't win the Europa League.
Exactly.
No one will. No one will care.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is a nice segue. By the way, Sophie hopefully will be along in a little bit. Our recording times this evening have unfortunately overlapped, but hopefully Sophie will be around at some point. If not, she sends her best. But yes, how do you feel now about there being 10 games left between this point and a potential title win?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel good about it. It makes the planning a lot easier in terms of fitness, especially fitness. That was my one concern going into Palace game was the fitness of players with that turnaround after 120 minutes, right? And so, that would have just been a microcosm of what to expect going forward if the team was still in Europa League, right? And so now you can, it's much more kind of easy to plan and schedule. And if guys do pick up knocks, they have a week off potentially between games, right? To get back. So there's that, not that undue pressure either. So I mean, it's always game by game, but I think now it just makes it you can solely focus on the Premier League. And I mean, obviously, the big thing now for these next, hopefully, international break doesn't come with any new surprises. Hopefully, so I think if you can get through this March international break, I mean, we're set up. We're really set up to focus on the title and hopefully get there.
I mean, this international break, it never ever feels like it comes at a good time, especially when you've got the momentum. You've won that last game going into it, which is important. We responded, I think, to the World Cup really well. Obviously, we came back with a win against West Ham. We then beat Brighton, and then we went into January, which was a month the year prior where we didn't win a single game in January.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were able to continue that run of form as well. We had our dip. Everyone has a dip at some stage. We always said it was coming. And we had that dip against Everton and Brentford and City. There's a frustration that came just ahead of that City game, but it is what it is. And we've managed to maintain the 5-point gap that we had when Gabriel Jesus got injured, and he's now returned. And we've managed to not only increase that gap to 8, of course, with City still having a game in hand, but with Eddie Nketiah out, Jesus has returned at the perfect time. I mean, talk to me about your view of the striker situation. Jesus coming back, Eddie getting injured. What do you make of the dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, I really think Eddie getting injured. It's I think there was a little bit of time there where the way Eddie plays and the way he doesn't interchange as effectively like Martinelli's used to really hindered Martinelli. It isolated him a lot more on that left wing, and he would get doubled really quickly. He was having to play. It was really limited his game. So editing injured, of course, you don't want a player to get injured, but then it forced Mikel to put Trossard at the 9 and go back to that false 9, which Jesus plays, which Martinelli is far more comfortable playing, that interchange, right? And so I think really it almost unlocked the best version of the team without hurting the feelings of Nketiah. Because if you drop him, he was in pretty good form overall. If you drop him in that regard, I mean, I think naturally he'd be quite frustrated. But if it's an injury, that's a whole different type of feel that comes with that. So I think Trossard coming in, being able to play the role of Jesus, different type of player, of course, but he has much more of that positional awareness going to that left wing, Martinelli interchanging the way that Jesus was playing early on. And I think one, of course, it makes the game easier for Martinelli. We've seen Trossard's impact. But I think thirdly, it doesn't put undue pressure on Jesus to come back and have to be, playing 60, 70, 80 minutes at a high quality just for the team to get results. He's able to be brought back methodically with bounce games. And you watch him play, he looks great. I mean, he looks great. I mean, just the way he's moving, he's so fluid. He adds such a unique, it's the danger, the threat level when he's on the pitch completely changes the team. So I think they're in a really, really, really good place. I think you're going to see Eddie, going back to being that substitute who adds a different type of playing style. But I think that's kind of, I think that's going to be his role from here on forward, whether that's, as a sub or, playing in those rotational games. So, I mean, the depth is there. And Trossard has been incredible, right? Some people on Twitter saying the best January signing of all time. I don't know if that's true or not. I have to go through it, but I mean, the impact has been incredible. The production, the assist rate is out of this world right now. So
I'm trying to think. You go back Austin Trusty's been amazing. But, genuinely, like obviously Odegaard joined on loan in January. I don't really count that as a January signing. Just looking back, who else came in January? Aubameyang was a January signing.
Not Karlstrom.
Kim Kallstrom, hell of a player. Hell of a player. Nacho Monreal is a January player. People like him a lot. Gabriel Paulista, was he a January signing? Apparently he was, according to this. Didn't know that, but Gabriel Paulista was a January signing. Kim Kallstrom back in 2013-14 now. Nacho Monreal in 2012-13. Thierry Henry coming back from New York Red Bulls. Yeah, that was a January deal as well. Aaron Ramsey coming up here saying Aaron Ramsey? Well, I think that was a loan deal, to be fair. Andre Arshavin, of course.
Yep.
We've had Antonio Reyes, of course, God rest his soul. So Theo Walcott was a January signing. Emmanuel Adebayor was a January signing. It's interesting. That's 0506. It says that we signed Diaby, Vela, Adebayor, and Walcott all in January. I mean, what a busy January window we had during that season.
I kind of remember their immediate impact, though. I can't remember anyone having this type of impact.
No. Oh, I tell you what, Emmanuel Aboué. There you go. That's a January signing of and a half. That is. So there you go. Yeah, so international breaks hit, Raj, and obviously, as I said before, it comes at moments where you never feel it's a good time, really. I mean, I feel only other clubs get to experience. Even if you're losing, you're like, well, I don't really want to go into this losing because then you're festering a loss for a couple of weeks. But if you go into it on a win, you're like, well, I don't want it to interrupt the momentum that could be built. But the plus that there is that William Saliba getting injured against Sporting with a back injury. Now, I've seen him twice in the flesh since that, walking past us in the mix zone. It's impossible to tell with a back injury, kind of the extent of that. I had people messaging me saying, did he look okay? How was he walking? I'm like, he walked fine, but that means nothing. Like, because it's all in the twisting, the extension, and all of that stuff, as you very well know. But is this, do you think, a bit of a benefit of a break, considering Saliba's precautionary absence at the moment, as we're told?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here we know obviously he missed the last match, and so there's certainly something there that they were concerned with enough to keep him out of that. And so, I mean, it gives him now time ramp back up. If we don't know how serious it is or isn't, but at the least it gives him more time and more treatment time rather than having to worry about games. And so it definitely comes at a good time for him. There's no good time for an injury, but it comes at a good time in that regard. So that's going to be key for him.
Yeah, it's going to be really key for him. I mean, back injuries, we don't know the extent of it, we don't know the details of it, but back injuries for athletes like footballers, what range are we kind of looking at for these types of things?
It really depends on what's going on, right? Like, is
Mm,
it a muscular spasm? What's causing it? What's the root cause? Has he potentially maybe had some of these issues already in training, right? Like,
mm.
right? It could be something where like he's kind of had a little bit of nagging issue there, and now it popped up in a game, right? And so it could be one of those things as well. So there's so much variance on it. It could be, people think back, but it could be hip. It could be hip related too, because there's a lot of overlap there as well. So it's so hard to say, and the club nowadays doesn't really give that much detail anymore, right? On anything, it just says injury. They'll be back when they're back. So
I mean, the detail that we have got, and we're recording this on Tuesday, but the detail that we did get today was that Tomiyasu has undergone knee surgery of what was
yep.
said to be a significant knee injury. We don't know if that's ACL, MCL. We have no idea what the specifics of it is. But when you hear the word significant knee injury, your mind immediately goes to ACL. If theorizing it is a rupture of his ACL, what kind of timeline could we be looking? Could this affect the start of next season?
I'd be shocked if it's ACL, to be honest.
Really?
I'm almost positive it's MCL based on how it happened. I think I just put out a
Mm.
video earlier today too, but I'm almost positive it's MCL with how it happened. And I mean, ACL typically would be 9+ months, but then in the release they did say that they're expecting him. Did they say there's something about
Preseason.
preseason? There's
Yeah.
no chance they would say that if it was an ACL because
Why?
you're looking at
Why is it the difference? Like, what? Because this is something obviously I've done my ACL personally. I don't think there was any damage to the MCL when I did it. But obviously,
mm,
we've seen Jesus have a significant knee injury, have surgery, come back in the space of 3 months. You say that the ACL is a 9-month issue. Why? What's the difference between? And why is there such a gap between the recovery times for an ACL and an MCL?
well, ACL just stabilizes. It's a much more prominent stabilizer of the knee compared to the MCL. So the MCL, really the major role is to stabilize against your knee going inwards. And if you
Mhm.
watch Tomiyasu, what happened when he slipped, that knee drives inwards, which puts a lot of pressure on that MCL. Whereas the ACL is involved really in any twisting of the knee, it's going to stabilize, any deceleration, it's going to stabilize as well. And so those are obviously much different demand on the ACL than there is on the MCL. And then secondly, the MCL, every major outside of the MCL, none of the other major knee ligaments really have blood supply to them. And blood supply is what helps heal the ligament. So the MCL has a very robust blood supply. So it heals quite well with or without surgery typically. So I mean, it's a joke, but I always say if you want to injure one major ligament, injure the MCL because it heals quickly and there's really no knock-on effects from it.
Even if there's like a full rupture, you can.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
repairable
MCL
again.
is the one major knee ligament, ACL, PCL, MCL, LCL. Of those four, the
Yeah,
MCL is the one that has the blood flow with it, that those strands can actually reattach to a
really.
good enough degree and heal together. Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously with the ACL from mine, it was a case of they took out hamstring tendons,
Yeah.
reconstituted those into the ACL, and I'm assuming that's because you don't have that blood supply to the ligament.
Exactly. So it's minimal blood supply. Everything has blood supply, but it's
Yeah,
not
of course.
enough to have it connect strongly. So you have to use, like you said, your own
Mm.
hamstring tendon or patellar or quad tendon.
When our bodies were designed, they just didn't build ligaments properly, like to heal, did
I don't think
they?
it's the design. I don't think it's the design. I just think there's a lot of stuff in terms of overuse when it comes to sports that tends to lead to some of these issues. So I
Yeah,
mean,
I guess
we
so. Yeah, I guess evolution never really planned to see us doing those types of activities and putting
mhm.
strain in those ways. So yeah,
and
I
you
guess there's an argument. I'm just moaning at the world now at this
yeah,
point.
and you're and doing it year round every 3 days, right? Like that's just not
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it's incredible.
I mean, yeah, let's talk about that aspect of year-round football because, of course, Arsenal will be traveling to your neck of the woods in terms of America rather than a specific
Yes,
location. But they'll be traveling to Washington, which I say your neck of the woods is completely the other end of of your neck of the woods of the US, of course,
yeah,
to face the MLS All Stars. Now, obviously, the MLS is a league that has continued to grow, develop, improve. I think it's changed and it's evolved from a league that used to take on kind of the offcuts of European
yeah,
talents, of course, that were reaching the end of their careers. It still does that in some senses, of course, and we still see some players move over towards the end of their career. But we're also starting to see real talent grow in the MLS and then develop to a point, not in just the MLS as well, but the CSL as well in
mhm.
Canada as well as improving. And Mexican football's always been at a fairly decent level as well. So we're starting to see that migration in the other direction towards Europe. So with Arsenal returning to play the MLS All Stars, who they faced back, I want to say it was in like 2016, was it?
Mid 2010s.
Yeah, it was mid 2010s, will be fair, much more accurate to say. And obviously, it's come a long way since then. So, am I fair to say that Arsenal will be facing a significantly tougher challenge than they would have back then?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of why you might even see. I mean, I think actually the biggest reason why teams go to the U.S. is for let's be honest, to establish a bigger revenue stream with the fan base. I mean,
Mm.
that's oftentimes what dictates. But I then secondly is that you're seeing better competition too in preseason games to help ramp the teams up. I think I think teams, especially last summer, were quite. I think they were quite happy with some of the competition that they had and some of the facilities that they have access to as well. And so so all those things combined, I think you're seeing much more of an integration now between MLS and the Premier League in the summertime. You even see, I mean, like Real Madrid will come out here multiple times. They came out to I think LA last was it 2 years ago if I remember correctly. So you're seeing
Uh, yeah.
I think, yeah, and just in general, you're definitely going to see a much better level of competition. And I think that speaks to your point of what you said about team and player development. We're seeing more and more guys in the MLS who then go to Europe.
The one player that I believe that most people will be expecting, if he's not, of course, left by then, is Thiago Almeida, who is
Mhm.
really kind of launching himself onto the scene. He's a 21-year-old Argentinian player. I think did he get called up for the Argentinian World Cup squad?
I don't know. I'm not sure actually.
I know that there was someone that was a big surprise in terms of getting called up. In November 2022, Almeida was officially called up to the Argentina World Cup squad to replace the injured Joaquin Correa only 5 days before Argentina's first game of the tournament. And he was a member of the squad that
Really?
ultimately won the tournament, becoming the first active MLS player to win a World Cup. So there you go. Very exciting player. Certainly, I'd be shocked if he doesn't get a move to Europe.
Well,
In the summer, almost certain to. But there's obviously some really interesting players still in playing out there. Henry Mukhtar at Nashville is the current top scorer, 23 goals. I know him, of course, from he used to spend a little bit of time at Red Bull Salzburg when he was over in Europe as well and spent a season there. Other players, Driussi, people will probably remember the name. We were linked to him quite significantly when he was playing at Zenit, I think, in Russia, before he's now moved to Austin. Gazdag, people might know from Philadelphia, an interesting player as well that has spent time previously in Europe. And we won't be facing Gonzalo Higuain, who announced his retirement
yes.
from football as well, which is sad. I feel like he was scoring goals. I think he got 16 so far. This campaign, which is great. And the other player that I wanted to mention is also who I would love to see is Christian Arango, who is, as far as I'm aware, a free kick master. For those that don't know who the guy is, make sure you go and check him out because he's certainly a very impressive talent. I say talent; he's he's not a starlet anymore. It's fair to say, but yeah, from set pieces, there is certainly some real talent there. But yeah, what do you feel about the relationship between Arsenal and the US? Because this is 2 seasons in a row, of course, that we're making the trip over in Orlando and Baltimore, and where was the other place that we visited last year? Where did we play? Chelsea. We played them somewhere else.
I know exactly what you're talking. I know. I have it in my head. I do not remember exactly.
It's a third. That was the third city that we
city.
visited. People who are listening to this are screaming the answer at us. But yeah, talk to me how you feel about Arsenal's relationship with the US now, and how often they're visiting, and how much of influence you think that comes from the ownership of the club as well.
I mean, yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I think there's always been a relatively large, fan base here, of from Arsenal, from what I've seen at least. Especially, I mean, I've been to major cities too, LA, New York, which kind of lends itself to that. But I think it's great. I mean, you have a real thirst here for some of that, and of course, the scarcity always makes people thirstier. So when you can only see a team maybe one time, not everyone has the ability to go across the pond and go watch a game. So I think it really makes that connection realer for fans, and they really value it. I mean, every time I just reading through, for example, today's Twitter post from Arsenal on them visiting DC, and you see a lot of the comments right underneath it, and there's like a lot. Every comment is like super excited and positive about their experience last year, about what they're looking forward to this year. So I think it's great. I think part of it is certainly the U.S. aspect, but I think in general you're seeing a lot more Premier League teams and teams in general trying to establish that U.S. connection, because I think I want to say, I think over here at NBC has done a great job with their coverage with Peacock. And so I think that's really opened up the exposure. Like, we actually get to watch the games here, and we don't have to stream them on the black market like people in the actual country sometimes, which is kind of silly, but which has opened up exposure for a lot of football here, and it's made it a lot easier. I mean, it used to be really difficult to watch Arsenal games, man, like really difficult to do so, especially in the 90s, even in the 2000s. So it's just becoming more and more accessible, obviously, and I think that naturally comes with more opportunities for a club like Arsenal to connect with their fans, all over the world, including the US. And the US is one of, it will spend money on sports, that we know. So it's a great place to be, if you're a big club.
Yeah, and of course, I'll be traveling out to the US next month in April to go to visit Chicago and visit Chicago Gooners. And of course, I'm looking forward to seeing so many of the listeners that we have out there that are going to be attending our live podcast and our weekend of events that's going on, including the gala. And of course, as I say, the live podcast as well. But there's lots of events. We've got what I think also been described to me as a block party, which I had to get definition of, because I'd never heard of a block party before. Of course, I know that US cities work in blocks and grid systems, and that's where it comes from. I assume.
You just shut down a street and you party, essentially, is what a block party is.
I mean, how on earth have we got license to be able to do that? It's ridiculous. Like, that's silly, isn't it? So yeah, apparently we're having a block party, which means somehow the Arsenal community of Chicago has enabled itself to shut down an entire street. So apologies for those in Chicago that want to get around that day that have no interest in us whatsoever. But we're taking over, which is going to be fantastic. So I'm not sure if there's tickets still available at the moment, but go to the Chicago Gooners website and go to Gooner Palooza 2023 to find out all the latest information. Of Sophie, of course, will be there, as well as will Mike and the guys from the Gooner, from the Arsenal Vision podcast, Elliot and Paul, going to be there too. So it's going to be fantastic. Looking forward to it very, very much. So the last order of the day to discuss that I wanted to talk to you, of course, is I know we've mentioned like the last 10 games of the season, but ultimately I wanted to end on a real positive, being the potential of Arsenal winning a title, and how confident you're now feeling, Raj, about this potentially happening with these 10 games left. Man City still very much in the Champions League, still very much in the FA Cup. How are you rating Arsenal's chances now of lifting that golden trophy? Well, silver trophy. We've got a gold one. It's got gold pieces on it, but that big silver trophy.
I think you're probably asking the wrong person this question. I honestly haven't even allowed myself to think about it. It's just like, I want to, but at the same time, and I am kind of secretly confident just because of the focus that the team has shown game in and game out. Like they haven't shown this this entitlement where they kind of feel like they expect it, and that gives me confidence, right? But at the same time, like 10, still 30 points. It's a lot of points left to play. You don't know what can happen. You just don't know whether it's injuries, whatever it is, right? It's still football at the end of the day. So I have a lot of confidence in the team. For me, I really do focus game to game. I really do. Just so many variables can change game to game. Like, I mean, I think a big one is going to be like if City does win their next Champions League, two-leg tie, their schedule it's really tight going into the final weeks, right? So, but what if they lose? Then that really takes their focus to now the Premier League, right? It's a massive variable right there that we don't know yet. But I think having being 5 points up, let's say City wins their next game, whatever it is, even being 5 points clear with Jesus coming back, I think it has to give you a lot of confidence seeing how these guys have handled everything from a mental standpoint. I found it a little bit funny. People were like, "Oh, Europa League's gonna make the team have a mental negative effect." I was like, they've already proven they bounce back every time. Look how they handled not making Champions League last season. And like Ramsdale had an interview today saying are losing that Champions League is part of what we are today, right? It's like these guys don't process failure as a negative. Of course, they're hurt by it, but they use it positively. I think that's a huge part of this club is the mental resilience. And that, gives me a lot of confidence for the team, even if they do lose a match or whatever it is, they're gonna respond in kind. But there's just too much time left for me to even think about. I think it's just hard to process, a Premier League champion. That just still feels so far away. I don't even know if I don't even know if it happens. It's something I'll believe until like you have to like process it
Several
and
months later. Yeah, the
yeah, and
parade. You'll finally believe it at the parade. That's
yeah, exactly, exactly. It's
Yeah,
one
no,
of
I know
those.
exactly what you mean. Like whenever I jump on someone else's show or I do like a news segment somewhere or I jump onto another club's channel to preview something and I'm asked the question like, do you think Arsenal will do it? I'm just like, I don't want to really answer your question, to be honest.
Mhm.
Like just the thought of it still scares me, and saying that it's going to happen still scares me. I jump when I do the Arsenal way of Umar. He's always been like, he's been saying since October, he's like, we're going to do it, and I'm like, I don't know how you can have that level of front and confidence to say it. But so far it's going pretty well for him, so I've got
Yeah.
to respect it. Before we wrap up, I want to do a little quick Strava update. For those of you that are in our Strava group, you can go to www.strava.com/clubs/ESARP. This week, Lee Maddox again doing fantastically well. 3 hours, 49 minutes worth of exercises in 7 activities. Brilliant to see.
Really?
58 kilometers he's managed there. I'm assuming that's cycling. I hope it's cycling. If it's running, fair play to you, mate, because that's fantastic. Martin as well doing really well. Martin Lever in the chat there. I wish I knew how to pronounce this. Do you know, Raj? Can you
I
help me
do
out?
not. I can't even really. No,
I'm going to try
that's
and get into
I'll
Google
let you finish it.
Translate now to see if I can get, because I want to give the guy justice, and I feel like I'm really bad. It
You're top
is
three.
yeah, Yevgeny Shumilin is how you pronounce it. I probably know how you pronounce it, but certainly what's coming up in my translation. So Yevgeny, smashing it as well, mate. 3 hours, 31 minutes, 3 activities done. Joe Dollar,
Nice
Simon,
job.
Jean Paul as well, Ross Parker, Steve, Luke, and Nick in our top 10. Fantastic stuff, guys. Make sure you keep it up. And thank you for sharing your activities continuously in our Strava group. Make sure you join up if you haven't done so already. Raj, thank you so much for your time, mate, this week, as always. Much appreciated.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, one thing to mention. I don't know if
Mm.
anyone. Did you see the video with Partey pulling up to the international, and they had the Arsenal physio with
Yeah,
him? So it was just interesting because they did that on the last break, the last international break with him too. So
really.
yeah, which is great. I think the thing I worry about international break, the reason that kind of scares me is that typically there's that lack of continuity and care. Like you're passing off. Let's say I'm the physio, you're the physio for the international team. like we're going to have different philosophies. I'm trying to give you the information, but there's still like that. There's that lost in translation, not literally, but I've spent the last 15 weeks with the guy, so I have a lot bigger sample size, whereas you may not. So if you're able to now take that physio and just have him with the player, you're not losing that continuity of care anymore, right? And so I think that's going to be, I think that's a great development. I think Man City did it with Haaland too earlier this season as
You mean the
well.
guy that took him to Norway and said, "Now we don't need you to play here, so you're injured."
Yeah, exactly.
That guy.
Nice, exactly. And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you're just seeing. I think that's going to be a new development you're going to see in general, especially with some of these highly critical players.
Mm. Yeah, we'll see. No, that's a really interesting point, actually. I'm glad you brought that up. Because I know it was circulating across social media, and a lot of people were going, "Oh no, is he in? Like, is there an injury?" That's immediately where people's minds go to, isn't it? You're just like, "Oh no, worst case scenario." But yeah, that makes complete sense. The continuity of having that personnel around you, the club's vision, the club's ideas, the expectations
Mhm.
around that is great. Yeah, you wouldn't. Sorry, go on.
I was saying, and just the player's going to be more comfortable with the physio that he spent that much time with, right? In terms of being honest with them, and he knows he can probably like tell if if Partey's actually feeling something, through his verbal body, not verbal but body language, right? Because you get a feel for when you're working with someone for a long time, you have a much better feel for them. So it allows you a much more nuanced kind of insight into that person versus if a new person comes in, a new patient or client, whoever it is, you don't have that experience with them to make those nuanced judgments.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good revelation, actually, talking about that. It's given me a bit of an idea, maybe for an article tomorrow that I'm going to write now. So much appreciated. Explaining why we saw the guy with Partey. Thank you, everybody that's tuned in and listened. Do make sure to drop a like on the video. As again, apologies that no Owen or Sophie this week. Owen, as I say, is at the snooker tournament. Sophie had a fantastic interview of Ian Stone, which you can check out on the Highbury squad, which is why she's not here tonight. It's overrun, so she's not been able to join us, but we'll hopefully have the Three Musketeers joining me again, hopefully next week in full. I feel like we've not been at full strength for ages. It's almost like Eric Ten Hag would be highlighting this podcast as an excuse in some way, shape, or form. But no, we'll be back very soon. You can find Raj on Twitter at 3CB Performance. You can find his YouTube channel as well, where he's done a recent video on Takehiro Tomiyasu and his injury as well, and why he believes it's maybe not as serious as an ACL injury and why it maybe is more likely an MCL problem. And yeah, we'll be back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to bring you all the updates around Arsenal and the club. But do drop a like on the video. Do subscribe if you're new. And yeah, we'll see you again soon. Have a fantastic day. And as always, up the Arsenal.